All right, so good morning, everybody. Today's Daf Lamed. So we got to the Mishnah, smack in the middle. I was going to tell Reese, I don't always end short. Sometimes go ahead, the extra. But of course, today we're going to end short. Yeah. I know. All right, I'm good. No, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm good. All right, now the Mishnah says, Ha'ish megaleach on the Naziros Aviv. So a man can be megaleach. Megaleach has a reference to not only just shaving your head, but also shaving your head and bringing the karbanos of. This is the main point. Ha'ish megaleach on the Naziros Aviv for the Naziros of his father. Knows his father was a Nazir. And he died, and he set aside. We'll soon see either money or animals or stumen or money. Let's say set aside money for his karbonos, so he's allowed to go ahead and use that money for his own personal nazirus. We'll see the case. So Ketzad, what's the case? Mishaya aviv nazir v'hifrish mastumen. So someone now the Tosfos over here. Actually rearranges the 100% reverse as to Pshat in the Mishnah, and we will go ahead and read it like the Tosfos. It's explained over here. Right, Tosfos is sort of like the Rashi over here, the Nazir, right? Most of the which is along the Rush over here on the side. So anyway, so it says over there to somebody who was Mishaya Aviv Nazir v'hifrish. Now, according to the new Girsa, it's Misha Haya Hu v'Aviv. Him and his father were both Nazirim at the same time. V'hifrish mastumin. Then the father set aside money for his Nazirus. Umeis, and the father died. V'amar Hareni Nazir Amanash Hamos Abba, and he says, I'm going to go ahead and use this money. This does not work. Since he was already a Nazir while his father was a Nazir, so therefore his father set aside money for his own obligation. Therefore, he's not able to go ahead and use his father's money for his father's obligation because he was already obligated, right, to bring money. So therefore, he can't use money that was already set aside for something else to use it for his current or his existing obligation. Right? So that you can't do. However, what's the case where he is? Mishaya, take out the word who. Mishaya Aviv Nazir. The Hifrish Aviv Mostumin. That his father was a Nazir, and then he went ahead and the father set aside money for his own Nazirus, and then the father died. Right? Zero mace. All right. Then he says, hey, I'm going to be a Nazir using my father's funds because when he's Mekabel Nazirus, he did not have an obligation yet, and therefore that money was still existing for Nazirus, and therefore his new obligation was based upon that something which was already set aside. Therefore, that's the case he's able to do it. All right. So the wording of the Mishnah is difficult because it's actually mamish pum fakert as it's written, but that is the way everybody learns of the sugya, and you'll see as the Gemara flows that was the pshat of the Mishnah. So only if the father was a Nazir alone can he go ahead and use his money, but he can't go ahead if they were Nazirim simultaneously. So Zak the Gemara. So my time, what's the reason why it says that normally that you can't go ahead and use, let's say someone has something set aside for their karbanos, right? We learned earlier you can't use that for your own chiyuv. So why are you able in this case to go ahead and use something that your father set aside for his obligation? Now you want to use it for your obligation. So my time, Rabbi Yochanan, halacha he ben Nazir. It's a halacha by Nazir. So the Gemara says, on that it says so pshita. Then it says over there that the son can do it, but not the daughter. So the father dies, so the son inherits the father. So the Gemara says it's pshita. It's obvious that the son can use the karbanos and the daughter can't. So the Gemara says pshita. So Ma'ila Meimer, what's the chiddush here, right? The ben Yerush is aviv baslo, right? Well, you're telling me to teach halachas of by Yerusha that if he has a son and daughter, that the son is Yerush and the daughter is not. Of course, that if one of them can go ahead and use it, it's the son, not the daughter. So Gemara says, not like tzricha, the less lay elabas. He only has a daughter, and therefore, okay, Ma'atim, what you have said, Yarshin Gemir in law. Maybe it's Bataras Yaresh, and therefore, since the daughter does inherit the father, there's no brothers, so maybe it should work just like Yerusha, and therefore, there's no other brother, then the daughter, inherits everything from the father. Included in that should be money set aside for Kabbanos of Nazir. So Kamash Malon, halacha, therefore it's halacha. The halacha is that we state that one can go ahead and use something that designated for one purpose of Kedusha, i.e. and the Naziris, is only done in the case of the son and not the case of the daughter, because that was the halacha of Moshe Sinai. So a question was asked. Now, Pligi Rabbanon Aled Rabbi Yossi alone. This whole thing in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi was the one who says, not in the case of when the father and son were Nazir together, can he use it? That's not case where he cannot use it. What's the case where Rabbi Yossi says he could use it? Is only when the father was a Nazir and he was not. And then he says, okay, I'll be a Nazir. I can use my father's, his karbanos, his money for karbanos. Now, so that was Rabbi Yossi. Say, well, Pligi Rabbanon Aled Rabbi Yossi alone to the Rabbanon argue Rabbi Yossi. And not only that, is it the argues on the Reisha or the Seifa or both? In other words, what was the case over there? There were two halachas there. When the father was a Nazir with him, he cannot, according to Rabbi Yossi. Or do the Rabbanan argue in that case? And now he says when the father was a Nazir alone, then he can use it. Maybe the Rabbanan argue and say, no, he still can't use it. So do the Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Yossi? And if they do, is it in one halacha, in the Reisha, or the Sefer, or both? Now, let's see. Tashma.
Even if he can use the money set aside for an Ola and a Shlamim, how can he use the money set aside?
Because it wasn't set aside for it was
just
Stuman. Yeah. That's what was the case. It was not Mufurish. If it was Mufurish, it's you can't. Right. Mm-hmm. Right, because that's what it says. I believe it says, most Stuman. Our mission says most Stuman. Now,
the case where he cannot use the money that his father set aside and
so you pull the Nadava. It goes to a Nadava fund. It goes to the Nadava fund, but it can't be used for someone to purchase offering. It has to do with extra Nadavas that are brought to Mizbeach, but it cannot be used for someone's obligatory. Right, yes, right, correct. Now, Tashma comes in 3 lines from the top. Ketzad, so now do the Rabbanan arguing that. The Ketzad, Amar Ish Megalech on the Zir Savi. What was the case when we said a person's Megalech using his father's karbanos or his money set aside for his father's karbanos? So Mishaya Aviv Nazir. If the father was a Nazir, and then the father set aside money for his Nazirus. Umeis, and he died. Va'amar, and then the father died. He left over the most student. Va'amar, he says, Hareini Nazir al Menashe Galech al Mois Aviv. I will become a Nazir on the condition that I can go ahead and shave and use that money towards my karbanos. This is the case of where one can go ahead and use the money of his father's Nazir, his Nazir karbanos. Aval Misha Hayahu Aviv Nazir, but he and his father were Nazir together. He frish Aviv Ma'is the Naziros, and the father set aside money for his own Naziros. Umeis, and the father died. Hare Elu Yipol Nadava. This money falls to the Nadava fund. It cannot be used for his own personal exit Naziros karbanas. Divi Rabbi Yossi. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, which we saw in our Mishnah. And Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda, Amru, Zehu Shmeglech al Mois Aviv. Even in this case, right, that he can go ahead and use that money. So the Rabbanan do argue. They say, no, if he and his father were in Nazir at the same time, and the money was set aside by the father, he can use that money for his own karbanos at the end of his Nazirs. Fine. Now, we're going to have a series of questions, most of which will not be answered. So, analyzing this halacha. So, boy, Rabba, yesh lo shnei banim nazir. If he has, let's say, 2 sons who are nazirim, he has a daughter, and then he has 2 boys. All right, let's say that case, right? So, 2 sons. Do we say that, hey, this money goes to Nazirus for a son, and therefore whichever son becomes a Nazir first, he can go ahead and take the money, use the first karbanos. Or do we say that no, it's like a Yerusha, they split it 50-50, and therefore that even if one of them is a Nazir before the other one, he can only use half the funds because the other half goes to the other brother. So boy Rava.
Even that we had before that we don't learn from Yerusha, right, by the boss. Does that apply like in all cases, or in this case, they're saying, we still have this abaya. maybe-
Right, so that there could have been a halacha, what you were saying, it was just said by men.
Right,
but so- but now-
it
but now-
teaches
all right,
Kashmalan that we
right.
don't learn from Yerusha.
So now we're going to ask. So even if that's not, so that we're sort of going in there. Okay, so let's say that maybe there is some Yerusha. So by Rabba, so Bechor Pasha, what about the two sons? Forget the case I just said, where there was a daughter, then two boys, right? Because the daughter was the Bechora, right? There's no Bechora, right? So let's over here, there was a Bechor, so he gets Pishnayim, he gets double. And then there's the other brother. So in theory, right, there's 66%, 33 or whatever, 67, right? So before Pasha Mai. So Hilchsa Gamir La Vihilkach Lebay Gluchalivum Mai Deshak. In other words, do we say that even if you say that they split it to Taras Yerusha, maybe it doesn't go like how Yerusha goes, where the Bechor takes Pishnayim. Maybe just the halacha Moshe Sinez, each son gets a chelik. I Dilma Yerushi, or maybe it's B'taras Yerusha, and he should get Pishnayim. Just like he takes a double portion in a regular assets, so to over here he should take it for that. Right? And if you want to say, okay, maybe it is Yerusha, but what about in this case? Maybe over here that when he takes it, when he can go ahead and shave it, maybe when it comes by Yerusha, we say such halachas, let's say Pishnayim, that only has to do with assets that are chulin. But maybe something which is designated as hektish, right, that to the temple, that he doesn't get Pishnayim in that. Or maybe that's, we say no, that since in that case, that he's using it to go ahead and he takes it to go ahead and become a Nazir. Maybe it doesn't make any difference, and he should be able to go ahead and do the double, right, and get double portion. Now, what about this scenario? So the Gemara doesn't really answer that case. What about this case? Aviv Nazir Eilam. So he was a Nazir Eilam. We learned by Nazir Eilam by certain cases whether one can go ahead and shave every 12 months or whatever it is. And he brings karbanos, whatever he goes ahead and lightens, his hair, right? So he brings karbanos, a series of karbanos then. So let's say the father was a Nazir Eilam. In other words, he was going to go ahead, trim his hair, get a haircut, bring karbanos, restart his Naziros, and so forth. So what about Avi Nazir Eilam, who Nazir Stam? He was just a regular 30-day Nazir. His father was a Nazir Eilam for many years, right? Then he would bring karbanos. He was getting ready to bring his, his set 1 year, and then the guy died, but the money was set aside. And the son says, okay, I'll be a Nazir, in memory of my dad, I'll be a Nazir for 30 days. So can he use that? It's not the same type of Nazirus, right? And also, maybe it was only said by Nazir Stam, but was never said by Nazir Eilam.
Wait, by Nazir Olam, we're talking about someone who has to bring karbanos every 30 days.
No. So not this. So this is a case of somebody who, when they get a haircut, a certain period of time to get a haircut.
Like every year.
Could be every year, right? We had machlokes before. How often was one said 30 days? What's it right? So when he cuts his hair, when he trims his hair, he has to bring a set of karbanos then, and then he restarts his naziros. So now that was the type of his, but he was a different type. So he was a Nazir Stam, right? Or what about this? Or Aviv Nazir Stam, who Nazir Eilam? So let's say it's the opposite. The father was a Nazir Stam, and he wanted to be a Nazir Eilam. So Kigam in halacha b'stam naziros, is it only by stam naziros with this halacha Moshe Sinai, this special rule that normally, because we saw earlier, you can't use karbanos of somebody else's, and you're able to go ahead and use your father's funds towards it. Maybe it was only said by stam naziros. Or maybe it doesn't make a difference because both do Nazir Eilam, or one is Nazir Eilam, one is Nazir Stam. What about this case? In this case, maybe it's okay because both of them are Nazir Torah. It's to restart. In other words, there was no Tuma, right? It was the same karbanos, Nazir that. However, what about this case? By Rav Ashi, Aviv Nazir, he was a Nazir and became Tameh. So he says, okay, I got to bring my birds and whatever it was in order to restart my Naziros, and then he died. So that money that he designated was for the purpose of the karbanos Tuma. right? Nazir Tuma, Bahu Nazir Talar. And he wants to go ahead and use that money after he says, okay, I'll become a Nazir for 30 days and use that and the money. So can he use it after a successful Nazir? So Nazir Talar. Or Aviv Nazir Tar, if the father was Tar, who Nazir Tami, and then he says, okay, I can become a Nazir using that money, and then he became Tami in the middle, he has to bring Karbanos Tuma, so he says, okay, maybe I'll use that money for that. So what's the case there? My take. So the Gemara does not give a teretz in any of these questions, and they remain unnamed, and we'll have the same questions, Mitzvah Shem, in 7.5 years.